All right, good evening, everyone. So it's a schus to continue in our journey in Sefer Tehillim. So we're going to go a little bit out of order. Tonight, in Mirz Hashem, we're going to jump back a little bit to Kapitel Mem Vav, chapter 46. So our series is dedicated by the Engelsberg, Dinovitzer, and Steinberg families, Le'ilui Nishmas Harad Yitzchak David Ben Meir Aryeh Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. So with that, let us begin. So we're beginning. So if you take a look at number one, and you're going to see why I jumped back into this kapitel just a little bit. And in Kapitel Mem Vav, so let's take a look. Lamnatseach livnei Korach al alamos shir. So again, David HaMelech begins Lamnatseach for the conductor, livnei Korach for the sons of Korach, alamos shir. Literally again, alamos. Alamos, so there's a number of things that are quite intriguing and actually quite problematic. Not problematic, but fascinating about this particular kapitel. So first of all, again, the concept of Livnei Korach, that the sons of Korach are being mentioned. But what I really want to draw your attention to is this word alamos. Because alamos, if you notice, the English translation of alamos is alamos, right? Exceptionally helpful. So there's a reason why that word remains unexplained and undefined, because we're going to see that it is quite an enigmatic word. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the general kapitel. So David HaMelech says, Elokim, lanu machaseh, va'oz Ezra b'tzaras nimtza ma'od. God is for us a shelter and strength, a help in troubles. He is very accessible. Al kain, lo nira mahamir eretz, ovamot harim b'leiv yamim. Therefore, we will not fear when the earth changes and when the mountains totter into the heart of the seas. Yamu yechmeru meimav yirashu harim bega'avaso sela. His waters shall stir and be muddied. Mountains shall quake for his pride forever. The theme of this kapitel is David HaMelech highlighting the idea that as difficult or as turbulent as the world may be, I have nothing to fear. Why do I have nothing to fear? Because I have the Ribono Shel Olam. Because I have HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And once I have HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ribono Shel Olam is able to steady me in all of the difficulties, all of the tumultuous circumstances and situations in life. This is a theme that we find repeated many times throughout Sefer Tehillim. David HaMelech finding himself in a constant state of existential turmoil, and the way that he is able to navigate the storm, the way in which he is able to go ahead and truly make it through, and quite literally make it through, is by going ahead and relying on the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is his rock, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is his stability, that the Ribono Shel Olam is by him every single step of the way. And again, you can even take a look towards the end of the kapitel in Pasuk 8, Pasuk Ches, Hashem tzivakos yimanu miskav lano Elahei Yaakov Sela. So this Pasuk really says it so beautifully. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress forever. David HaMelech was the first person to refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a fortress. God, David HaMelech refers to God in many different ways, but the notion of a fortress is uniquely Davidic. And David HaMelech uses that imagery many times. What does a fortress do? What does a fortress do? It protects. It protects. In David HaMelech's life experience, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He protects. Now, the reason why this is incredibly important is because it's always fascinating to see, Mashi, thank you very much. It's fascinating to see how we have different perceptions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll give you an example. The Medrash brings down that when Hashem appeared to Klal Yisrael by the splitting of the Yam Suf, by the splitting of the Red Sea, he appeared as a young, valiant warrior. That's what God looked like. Yet when God appeared to the Jewish people by Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, he appeared as a wizened old man. Now the truth is, it makes a lot of sense, because you imagine you're the Jewish people and you're by the Red Sea and the Egyptian army is in hot pursuit, and imagine you see an old man in the heavens. What are you thinking to yourself? Oh God, right? Like literally like, oh God, like, right? Is this it? Like, so in other words, it was important for them to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to perceive Hashem as a warrior, as young, as vital. Conversely, on Har Sinai, where we're receiving Torah, a wisdom that is older than time itself, The emotional takes on that image ultimately of an older man. I've often thought that it's always interesting to see how we each relate to Hashem differently. Right? And what is the way we relate to Hashem? What is that dependent on? Very often, what is it dependent on? It could be your age, right? What else? More importantly than age, your circumstances, your life experiences. That's the truth. If someone has suffered a lot in life, their view of God is one way, and understandably so. If someone has lived a beautifully blessed existence with very little adversity and challenge, their perception of God is a different way. And the incredible part is there a right perception or a wrong perception? No. In fact, Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch brings down, he says one of the reasons why when we begin Shemona Esrei, we begin with the bracha of Avos. Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Velokei Yaakov. Refer to the God as the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why? Rav Hirsch says so beautifully, because Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov related to God in fundamentally different ways. Avraham Avinu, first of all, quote unquote, discovered God. So that by definition is something different, right? Yitzchak Avinu, again, wasn't the trailblazer of his father, Compared to the other Avos, compared to his father and his grandfather, he led a rather quiet life. Yaakov Avinu's life, difficulty, tragedy, adversity, pretty much like from the moment he was in the womb until the moment that he died, right? So each of them related to God in different ways. So one of the reasons we begin Shemona Esrei with this concept of Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov is to highlight the incredible idea, which is we all have the same 630 mitzvos, right? We all have the same obligations, we all have the same Shulchan Aruch, we all have the same Torah. But what changes Jew to Jew, person to person? Our conception and perception of God. And that's part of the unique individual relationship that each of us cultivates with Hashem. So whereas we all have the same Torah, I would venture to say not one of us has the same type of relationship with Hashem. And by the way, isn't that beautiful? It's the same way that there's no parent who has the same relationship with every single one of their children. Right? Every child has a different kind of relationship with a parent. So it's no different than with our father. He has a different relationship with each of us, and each of us has a different relationship with him. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because the notion that David HaMelech refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a miskav, as a fortress, is because what did David HaMelech rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu for more than anything? What did he rely on God for? Protection. Which in and of itself, if you think about it, is such a overwhelming, and I find personally very sad reality of David HaMelech's life. What he needed, some people really need God for parnasa. So we all need God for everything, but in people's perception, sometimes what's my most acute reliance is parnasa, because maybe that's the thing I struggle with. Other people, it's for health, because that's the thing I struggle with. Other people, it's a shidduch, it's children, it's all different kinds of things. For David HaMelech, what he struggled with most was a sense of security. Because in David HaMelech's life, everyone who he knew, at some point in time, turned against him. Now, it's a little bit hyperbolic. It wasn't everyone, but it was almost everyone. In other words, you could count on one hand the number of people who did not turn against him. Let's say it like that. Right? It's easier to count the people who did not turn on David than to count the people who did turn on David. So David HaMelech's perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, you're my fortress. You protect me against everything that's in this world. But isn't it incredible that from a theological perspective, what doesn't protection mean? I know that's a terribly worded question, right? But what doesn't protection mean? Protection doesn't afford you what? A guarantee. Or to say it a little bit differently, protection doesn't afford you protection. What do I mean by that? The notion of protection, we assume, means protection prevents something from happening to me. In the theological sense, protection doesn't necessarily prevent. So what does protection do? Protection gives me the strength to get back up. Protection gives me the strength to say, you know what? This was a difficult situation. This was a difficult circumstance. I have to weather this storm, but I'm not down and out. I'm not down and out. So it's an incredibly important idea. And this is very important in general because sometimes we become very disillusioned with God when we ask for something or we ask for a particular type of salvation and it doesn't come through. We feel let down. Maybe we even feel betrayed. But that's because we sometimes have a skewed understanding of what divine protection means. Divine protection may not be preventative protection. So it may not prevent the difficulties or the tragedies from occurring. But divine protection says, I protect you from crumbling. Right? I protect you ultimately. Again, so I have here. I didn't drink from it. No, I'm good. I drink before share.
There's my protection.
So this is incredibly important because protection isn't necessarily prevention, right? So sometimes, again, even with the protection, and the truth is I've been thinking a lot about this because the truth is, we follow the news that happens in Eretz Yisrael. And just today, the third terror attack within the course of a week, right? Be'er Sheva, Chadera, Bnei Brak, this evening, 5 people killed in a terror attack. You think to yourself, remember, these are the same streets in Bnei Brak that just a week ago were filled with Jews giving kavod to the Gadol Hadar, to Reb Chaim. There's a certain overwhelming thing when you speak about the reality and the life of our nation. So sometimes it leaves you wondering, what is it? What else could we do to earn God's protection? What else could I do? What else could we do as a nation to be earning God's protection, right? What else? You're never going to find Ba'alei Chesed greater than Klal Yisrael. You're never going to find a nation that is so steeped in human kindness. The nation that is, and by the way, it's human kindness. It's not just, it's not, I have to tell you something amazing, just as an aside. I had the schus to be in Eretz Yisrael last week, and one of the meetings that I had was with the Minister of Aliyah and Absorption, and she was talking about the Ukrainians who are coming in. And she said something amazing. She said, we know that about half of them who are coming in are not Jewish. She said, we're not asking anyone what their religion is. If they need a haven, if they need a place, the state of Israel is swinging its doors wide open. Where else in the world do you have a nation like this? Where else do you have a nation like this? And then you see these tragedies occur, and you wonder, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where's the protection? But David HaMelech says, no, that's because you're assuming protection means prevention. Difficult things happen. Tragic things happen. And that is part of the fabric of the human condition. Divine protection is HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects us from giving up. He protects us from crumbling. He protects us from falling down and losing the will to get back up. And that is the greatest level of protection. Because to think that we're going to be shielded from all the adversity in life, no, there's never a guarantee like that. There's never been a promise made like that. Never. Adversity is part of the fabric of the human condition. But the protection is, I promise, no matter how intense the adversity is, I will always be by your side, whispering in your ear, holding your hand, encouraging you. You could do this. You can get back up. You could start again. You could regroup. That's the fortress of David HaMelech. But let's focus, for the few minutes we have together, on the word alamos. Right, that's what I want to spend the whole shir tonight on. Just one word. Lamnatzeach livnei Korach alamos shir. So what's alamos? So here, the Mefarshim have a couple of different approaches. Rashi says in number 2, alamos, shem shel kli sher, b'divrei yomim. So Rashi says, and in fact, again, the Radak says the same idea. He says, alamos means it's an instrument. Now we found this. It's the name of an instrument, type of instrument. We've seen this many times throughout our journeys in Sefer Tehillim, which is that David HaMelech not only composed the music for the Levitic choir, but what else did he do? He also told the choir which instrument to use. So therefore, again, the approach to remember Lamatzeach is the conductor of the Levitic choir, Livnei Korach. Again, we'll have to save Livnei Korach for a different time. Al Olamos. Ultimately, when you play this song, this should be played with the Alamos instrument. Okay? If you take a look at number 4, in the Sefer Zera Yaakov, he takes a different approach. And he says, Al Olamos. You listen to this. He says, Al Olamos, Roshei Tevos, Al Maves. The Zera Yaakov says in number 4, Alamos is a contraction of 2 words. Al Maves, literally on top of death or transcending death. According to the Zera Yaakov, the entire theme of this particular chapter is a reference to the Messianic era. What's one of the incredible hallmarks of the Messianic era? Ultimately, we transcend death. How do we transcend death? Tchias HaMesim, resurrection, death will go away. Now this, by the way, is an interesting topic by itself, which is, at the end of the day, what does happen with death in the Messianic era? Is it that no one dies? That would seem to be highly improbable, because at the end of the day, life is only meaningful because there is death. Right? Without death, if life becomes an infinite renewable resource, then the truth is, can you imagine, what your garage is going to look like, right? Imagine we procrastinate now, and I know that I'm going to die one day. Imagine what happens if I thought I was immortal, or if I was immortal, what's the motivation to accomplish anything? Whatever you don't get done now, you'll get to next century. You don't do it next century, you get in 5 centuries from now. There's no push. We don't realize it. That's why when the Pasuk says at the end of creation, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov ma'od, God saw everything that He made, and it was very good. The Medrash says, what was very good? Zehu hamaves. The best thing God created was death. It sounds a little bit strange, and a little bit morose, but if you think about it, it's absolutely true. Because there is no greater motivator in life than death. There is no greater motivator than knowing that my life one day will come to an end. I hope it'll be very long, but the truth is we know not how many years we have on this earth. That in and of itself is the greatest motivator to move, to do, to accomplish, to change. So therefore the Zera Yaakov says something amazing. Alamos al maves. This is a song to be sung. This is a song to be sung. Al maves, when we transcend death. When does mankind transcend death? The Messianic era. Yemos HaMashiach. And in fact, the Medrash says over here, number 5, Zeu Shamar HaKasuv, Osek Gidolos ad in Cheker, V'niflaos ad in Mispar. In Adam Yachal L'Saper Gidolosa V'niflaosav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'cheinu Omer, actually, let me skip down to number 6. Look at Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch echoes this same idea, and he says, Al Alomos Shir, he says, are the secrets of life. Now, watch what's just happened over here. And this is, I'm always riveted by this, because the truth is, this is the beauty of Torah. There's one word, right? We're going to have a whole shir on one word. And what's incredible about it? The diversity of opinion about how to explain that one word. Rashi says, Alamos, what is everybody getting all excited about? It's an instrument. It's an instrument, right? The Zera Yaakov, oh no, it's not an instrument, it's a contraction. Al Maves, this kapitel about the greatness of God is a reference to the Messianic era. Rav Sham Shlomo Hirsch, something dramatically different. Number 6, Al Olamos. Listen to how Rav Hirsch says, Al Olamos means, literally again, Al means on top of, Olamos, worlds. Worlds, meaning what? There are the secrets, the mysteries of life, that which is hidden to others and can be sensed only the ecstasy of song. So Rav Hirsch says something so beautiful over here, which is, David HaMelech is singing a song, Al Olamos, about the things ultimately, again, that are on top of the world. On top of the world, Al Olamos. So ultimately, again, what does this refer to? Rav Hirsch says, okay. Rav Hirsch says it refers ultimately, again, to the things, the mysteries, the secrets of the world that are almost like above the world in its entirety. So again, you have the Zera Yaakov talking about the idea that it's reference to the Messianic era. The Medrash number 5, I just pointed out over here, also understands that it refers to the way that God runs the world, the mysteries of God. That there are things that God does in this world which we simply do not understand. We simply do not understand. Rav Shamshon Ophel Hirsch, same idea. Al Olamos, ultimately those things which are on top of the world, the great mysteries of life. So I want to use this as a springboard. I know we weren't supposed to start, next week is our pre-Pesach shir, but the truth is I'm chomping at the bit a little bit for Pesach. Right? So I want to show you something amazing that actually fits into this kapitel so beautifully. If you take a look at number 7, just to show you the beginning of the Haggadah. I hope discussion of Pesach is not a trigger for anyone over here, right? So let's take a look. So the Haggadah says something really beautiful. The Haggadah says, how do we start the Haggadah? This is the beginning of the section of Magid, Manishtana. Good, everyone's familiar with Manishtana. So Manishtana, let's just go through this very quickly. We ask 4 questions. 4 questions. Why is this night, or really it's, how is this night different from all other nights? So again, question number 1. Every night we eat leavened or unleavened products. Tonight only matzah. Okay, that's question 1. Number 2. Every other night we eat whatever vegetables we want. Tonight the focus is on maror. Question number 3. Every other night we don't even dip once. Tonight we dip twice. A reference to the dipping of karpas, a reference to the dipping of mar. Question number 4. Every other night we go out and we eat either sitting up straight or reclining. Tonight we all recline. Good. No surprises here. We've been asking these same 4 questions for a few thousand years. Right? These are the 4 questions. The fear kashas. Right? The 4 questions of Manishtana. Right after Manishtana is what we would assume is the section of Avadim Hayinu, which we assume is what? If you're reading the Haggadah, how do you look at this next paragraph? What is it? It's an answer. So what's the answer? Avadim Hayinu leparo b'mitzrayim. We were servants to Paro in Egypt. Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham biyad chazaka ubizroa nituya. And ultimately, again, Hashem took us out from Mitzrayim with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. That's the answer to all 4 questions. What's the problem? Doesn't really seem to answer the questions, right? Remember, we're asking very specific, practical questions about why the night of the Seder is fundamentally different than any other night. And the answer is, God took us out of Egypt. So how does the answer reconcile to the question? So if you take a look at number 8, so I show you something beautiful. And this is like a compendium Haggadah. The Otzma Farshi Haggadah quotes over here the Ritva on the right hand side. Avadam Ayinu Kasef HaRitva Zeu Tchilas Haggadah Utshuas Manishtana Lefi She'avadim Ayinu L'Parim Mitzrayim. So the Ritva says this is indeed to be construed as an answer. The answer to all of the questions. There's one answer to all of the questions. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. He goes on. L'dasa Abu Draham. Zohi tshuva al tamachilas hamatzah hamaror. So again, let's go through this. So I understand how this answers matzah, right? Why do we eat matzah tonight? Because remember again, we were slaves in Egypt. God took us out. And God took us out so quickly that what? The bread didn't have time to rise. So it answers matzah. It also answers why we eat maror. Why do we eat maror? Right? To remember the bitterness of the servitude. Al kenan ochlim matu maror. Yesho sifu, shevekach gam nitnas tshuva alatam sheremsum b'layla hazeh. Ultimately, again, we also understand why, based on this, why we recline. Because we were servants to Pharaoh. God took us out, we're free. And how do free people eat? Apparently, at least historically, how did free people eat? They recline. He goes on. V'yeshekasvu sha'ata mashivim rak al shelas ha'seba. Good. Al shelas ha'tibul. I'm looking at the next paragraph. 3 paragraphs down on the right hand side. Al shelas ha'tibul ein mashivin mipnei. So listen to this. So far, what we have is like this. We ask 4 questions. We give one answer. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt and God took us out. So what the Abu Draham is commenting is, well, the truth is that answer actually works. It tells me why we eat matzah, because God took us out of Egypt and He took us out quickly. It tells me why we eat maror, because we were slaves. It also tells me why we recline, because behaviorally we are demonstrating our newfound freedom. What doesn't it answer? What doesn't it answer? Dipping. So interestingly enough, he explains that's by design. That's by design. Why is it by design? Why do we do all of these dippings on the night of the Seder? So the Gemara says it's actually not for any particular reason other than to do something strange to get the children to ask questions. There is no deeper halachic, hashkafic, moral message embedded in the dipping. It's just there because it is a departure from the norm. We want to keep the children engaged. How do you keep the children engaged? Ultimately, do things that look strange with the hope that ultimately they're going to ask, why are you doing this? So it's actually a beautiful explanation. So the one phrase or the one statement, Avadim hayinu lepara b'Mitzrayim, answers 3 out of the 4 questions. The 4th question about dipping doesn't have an answer because at the end of the day, there's no real rhyme or reason why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it I'm doing it so it looks strange because I want the children to ultimately ask questions. Now here's what's interesting. If you take a look at number 9, Rabbi Nachman has a different approach. And this is really quite beautiful. Rabbi Nachman says as follows. Look at number 9. Avadim lepara b'Mitzrayim. Afapi shemashivin leben avadim hayinu v'chol sipor yitzias Mitzrayim afapi kein bevadai ein zet heretz maspik levaer uletaritz b'shlemus kolakushios shel manishtana. So Rabbi Nachman says, I don't understand. What is the core obligation of the Leil HaSeder? Let's think about this just more. We'll talk about this more next week. But what is the core obligation of the Seder experience? What's the core obligation? Tell the story. Tell the story to who? Really to the next generation, right? Now, again, it could be your children, it could be your parents, it could be your friends, it could be the people at the table. The idea over here is transmission. That's the idea. You know, one of the most incredible things. Yeah, good. It's transmission. So Rabbi Nachman says like this. If it's transmission, right? If that's my goal to transmit the story, then if my child is asking 4 questions, what should I do? I should answer them fully. In other words, it's very interesting that we just saw how Avodim Hayinu Lepara b'Mitzrayim could technically answer 3 out of the 4 questions, and the dipping question doesn't really get an answer. But why are we answering questions that way? Right? The whole point of this, if my child is asking me those questions, my job as a parent is to teach. My job as a parent is to transmit, is to share. So why am I answering like shorthand? Right? I could sum up all of your questions in one phrase. Avodim hayinu. Why don't I say, mamala, tatala, here's why we go ahead and we eat the matzah and go into a whole thing. By the way, we do it later on in the Haggadah, right? Where do we do it later on? By Rabbi Gamliel Haya Omer, right? We do explain Pesach, matzah, maror. We do actually explain that later on. But why over here answer it shorthand? And look what the Rebbe says. He says something so beautiful. 3 lines down in number 9. Ki lefi mil sichlenu Adayin kasha kol dikduki hamitzvos upratein she'osin belal Pesach levad. Mikol shekin b'shari mos hashana ma shayachos lahem le'inyan yitzias Mitzrayim. V'lama anu mechuyavim dafka letabel shtei pam zech le'yitzias Mitzrayim. So Rabbi Nachman says, here's what's funny. If you take a look at so many of the things we do in Judaism, let's be honest. If you're an outsider and you're looking at this stuff, what does it look like? It looks weird, right? I always laugh. We always have a laugh at my Seder table. Like the best part of the Seder is korech, right? It's always it's so funny to watch, right? We're taking 2 pieces of matzah, we're putting some lettuce in there, dipping it in charoses, and everybody's got these beautifully crafted sandwiches. And the sandwich lasts until 1 bite. Right, one bite, and literally again, the table's so beautiful, and everything is so wonderful. Everybody's dressed so nicely, and literally, like in 3.4 seconds, there's 15 pounds of matzah on the floor. Right, it's like matzah meal up to my knees. Right, there's lettuce, there's this, there's that. It's a culinary catastrophe. Right, like it's so weird. It happens to be as an aside. That's because, by the way, we know from here that in times of the Beis Hamikdash, they used soft matzahs. They did not use shmura matzah like we have wafers. They used soft matzah. That's why korech means not a sandwich. Korech means a wrap. They would make a lafa. They'd make a shawarma. They had lamb. They had carbon Pesach, which was lamb. You put in their lamb. You put it in your wrap, in your soft matzah. They ate kidneys back then also. So you can even have hummus. You can even put hummus in there, right? So you can go ahead. That's literally what they have. So okay, we have a zecher. Think about this even more. Right, to eat matzah. So you ever have a seder that's running a little bit late, and you're butting up against chatzos, halachic midnight, and you did not eat the afikomen, right? Can you imagine, like, if somebody was live streaming this event, right? Such civilized, orderly people, and suddenly, like, human vacuum cleaners, right? Right? As much matzah as the human mouth could go ahead and contain, because I did kizayis, maybe two kizayim, and this, that. It's strange. It's strange. And the truth is, Rabbi Nachman says, even a lot of stuff we do during the year, there's a lot of strange stuff. And a lot of the things that we do, we do Zecher L'Yitzhak to remember the Exodus. So the Rebbe says, how do you understand sometimes the strangeness of some of our practices and the fact that everything is linked to the Exodus? And the Rebbe says something so beautiful. He goes on, he says, and even dipping, right? We're dipping, right? I'm dipping stuff in charoses. I'm dipping stuff in salt water. Why are we dipping everything in everything? What is all of this? He goes on, he says, not only that, v'chein, lama chametz aser b'mashu. Think about this for just a moment. If you're cooking for Shabbos, you're cooking your chicken soup, right? And a little bit of milk, a tiny speck of milk, falls into your chicken soup pot. What's the status of your chicken soup? Absolutely kosher. Yet if you're cooking soup for Pesach and a tiny, minuscule piece of challah falls into your soup, done. The Rebbe says, how do you understand that? Right? At the end of the day, how does one understand that? That chametz is aser b'mashu? That at the end of the day, chametz again, a tiny little bit of chametz could destroy everything? And the Rebbe says something so beautiful over here. He says, v'im b'shvil, so skip down a little bit. Skip down. He says, he delves into the whole issue of chametz over here. He says, I don't understand why chametz is totally asr. He gives an interesting mashal. Sukkos, the Yom Tov of Sukkos, right? Where are you supposed to move your life for the Yom Tov of Sukkos? Into your sukkah. So Rabbi says, tell me, is my house asr during Sukkos? Right? Does my house become total? You can't go in the house, no matter what. A house is asur of a sukkah. So I don't understand. A sukkah, I'm supposed to live in the sukkah. My primary dwelling is supposed to be in the sukkah, but I can't enter into my house. Yet by Pesach, chametz is not only asur, but you can't have it, you can't own it, you can't see it. What's going on here? So skip down to the second paragraph in number 9. Here the Rebbe writes, he says, Rak be'emes, yesh shaychus gadol, inyan yetzias Mitzrayim, l'chol ha-Torah kula, u'l'chol ha-mitzvos u'pratehem. Aval anu ein mavinin kol ze bepratios. Says the Rebbe, here's what we know. Embedded in every single mitzvah, and embedded in every single detail, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His great wisdom. But often, I just don't understand it. Aval be'emes ze ikar hatikun shemodiyin lo shekol hashinuyim shebalayla hazos v'chol haTorah v'hamitzvah hakol b'shvil lahamshich aleinu ha'emuna hakidosha shagila lanu berachamov b'yetzias Mitzrayim v'al yidei osos ha'mosiv hanoram she'asi imanu adin cheker. The Rebbe goes on, essentially says, do you know what we teach our children on the night of the Seder? We teach our children the concept of emunah, of belief. And you know what belief is? It's not called belief if you understand it. And it's not called belief if you could rationally appreciate it. And it's not called belief if it makes sense to you. The beauty of emunah and the beauty of belief is a willingness to submit to something even though I don't understand it. Even though I have absolutely no idea. I don't understand the dipping. I don't understand the chametz. I don't understand so many things that I do in my Yiddishkeit. I don't understand it, but I believe it. And I don't have to understand it to believe it. Because what emunah ultimately means is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I give myself over to you. And I give myself over to your Torah. And I give myself over to your mitzvos. And I just give myself over to your service in my entirety. And says Rabbi Nachman, that's the answer we give our children. Right? See, if you look at Haggadah, it's something amazing. So we asked the Manashtana 4 very specific questions, right? Why do we do this, and this? Now, do we give complete answers? Do we give complete answers? Yeah, we do. Over the course of the Haggadah, we do explain why we do all these different things. We do. But the first answer I give my child, the first answer I give at the Seder is, Avodim hayinu leparo b'mitzrayim. We were once slaves, and Hashem took us out of servitude, and we followed Him out of Egypt. Let's be clear. God didn't kidnap us from Egypt. He didn't kidnap us. We had a choice to go or a choice to stay. And remember again, 3/5 of our people stayed behind in Egypt. They did not come out. Those of us who left, from whom we descend, went out willingly and followed God into the desert. As the Navi says, Zacharti la chesed ne'urayich, ahavas kilulosayich. Hashem says, I remember the kindness of your youth. Lech teich acharai b'midbar. Hashem says, we did a kindness for Him. What was the kindness we did for God? We followed Him out. We followed Him out. So the first answer we give is, before we start getting into details, before we start getting into reasons, let's be clear on one thing. We do what we do because we believe. And belief doesn't mean understanding. And belief doesn't mean comprehending. And belief doesn't mean that intellectually I could explain anything and everything. But I believe, and I give myself over to my God and to my Torah. Why? Because once upon a time I was a slave. And Hashem took me out. And do you know why Hashem took me out? He took me out to have a relationship. He took me out so I could be a best version of myself. He took me out so I could self-actualize. And therefore, I give myself over to Him. The first lesson of the Haggadah has nothing to do with intellect and everything to do with your neshama. In fact, and we'll talk about this more next week, you know what the entire essence of the Haggadah is? The entire essence is to dull the intellect and to amplify the neshama. That's the whole avoda. And what's the proof to that? How do you end off? Isn't it incredible? How do you end off the Seder night? What's the last piece of the Seder? The last piece? It's actually after the Haggadah. Shir HaShirim. Shir HaShirim is a love song. It's a love song between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. Shir HaShirim is not intellect. Shir HaShirim is all heart. Shir HaShirim is all neshama. It's all soul. Because the goal, see, it's an interesting thing. We are an intellectual people. But sometimes the goal is not to be the intellectual. Sometimes the goal is not to rattle off 15 answers for every single thing. Sometimes the goal is not to have the good vart, right? The good idea. Sometimes the goal is just to say, you know what, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? I love you. I love you. Why do I love you? I don't know. If somebody were to ask you, why do you love your child? Why do you love your spouse? Why do you love your parents? Why do you love your friends? Could you articulate why? You don't have to explain why you love someone. You just know that you do. Avadim hayinu lepara b'mitzrayim vayotzeinu. Hashem, you took us out. You took me out. And for that I am forever grateful. For that I am eternally indebted. And for that I am literally in love with you. That's the answer, says Rabbi Nachman, we give to the 4 questions. 4 intellectual questions, great questions. We don't answer with intellect. We answer with heart. We answer with soul. We answer with emotion. There's a place for intellect a little bit later on in the Haggadah. But the whole essence of the Leil HaSeder is to develop a feeling of love for the Ribono Shel Olam. And an acceptance, and I think this is something really important, an acceptance that what true Emunah means, there's like a phrase, what is it, loving someone is never having to say, I'm sorry? Which is the most stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. It doesn't make any sense, right? But whatever, but what does it mean ultimately to be in love with Hashem? What does it mean to have Emunah? To have Emunah means I accept the fact I'm not going to understand things. I accept it. I accept that I'm not going to understand. And it's okay not to understand. Because very simply, Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world and I don't. So of course I'm not going to understand so many things that He does. And Emunah is the process through which I accept that I won't understand and I get comfortable with not understanding. That's the avoda of the Seder. To fall in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that love is, I trust you. I know you always look out for me. I am in your service. I am committed to you. I am okay with the fact that I'm not going to understand things that happen to me in my life. And I certainly won't understand things that happen to Klal Yisrael. That's the avoda. If we bring this full circle, this is what David HaMelech was saying as well. Remember again, let's go full circle. Now back to number 1 for just a moment. What did David HaMelech say in the beginning of chapter 46 in Tehillim? La natseach livnei Korach al olamos. And Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch said in number 6, bless you, what's al olamos? Al olamos means the things, the mysteries, the secrets of life, the things that are above this world. And you know what David HaMelech is teaching us? La natseach. Sometimes the greatest song you could sing in life is when you're able to reach the level of accepting the fact that I don't understand the things God does. But I love Him anyway. I don't understand why you do these things. I don't understand why certain things occur. It's al olamos. Some of the things you do at Kadosh Baruch Hu are above this world and I don't understand it. But lam natseach. But I love you anyway. I accept you anyway. I am embedded with you anyway. A person who is able to reach that emunah, lam natseach. That is the greatest song that one could sing. I will tell you, as I get older, I begin to see that there is so much more profundity in the neshama and in emotion than there is in intellect. Intellect is important, right? Because remember again, emotion without intellect is like a runaway train, right? But the problem is, intellect without emotion is a dry experience. There obviously has to be a hybrid, has to be a combination of the two. But it appears that what David HaMelech is saying is, sometimes the greatest song and the greatest feeling of joy that a person could experience is when they reach true emunah. And true emunah is encapsulated in one word, al olamos. That there are things that God is going to do that are above this world, that I'm just never going to understand. I can't understand it, but I accept it. I can't understand it, and I'm comfortable with not understanding it. And again, as we saw, like Rabbi Nachman says, this becomes the avoda of the Leil HaSeder. So we begin, right, and everyone's gearing up for an intellectual experience. 4 great questions, good targeted questions, matzah, dipping, maror, reclining, excellent questions. And what do we say? Stop. Before we start discussing the intellectual underpinnings of Judaic practice, here's what I want to tell you. I believe in Hashem. I love Hashem. He took me out of Egypt. He allowed me to become me. He took me as His own, and I took Him as mine. I love Him. I accept the fact that I don't understand many of the things that He does, and I'm comfortable with that. That was the great lesson of David HaMelech. The greatest song David HaMelech said we could sing is the song of Emunah. And on the night of Pesach, when we experience a rebirth, when we experience a renaissance, we're going to accomplish many things over the night of the Seder. But the first thing we want to accomplish is to try to become true Ba'alei Emunah. So we should be Zocha Meretz Hashem. Because the truth is, I think that this really may be one of the challenges of our generation. Because if you think about it, we have access to learning like we've never had before. Right? Learning is at our fingertips anyway, right? You can learn in any language, anytime, anywhere, any platform, any format. So no longer is access to learning a problem. But it's interesting that I think we begin to see that as there has been like a proliferation of intellectual Judaism, the challenge now becomes in the realm of emunah, of dveikus, of just a pure and simple connection with Hashem. Not one that is based on the intellect, and not one that is based on profound, dramatic, deep understanding, but the emunah of like a Pashat Yid, of just a simple Jew. Of just a simple Jew who knows his father, who loves his father, and is willing to accept that sometimes the father does things that the child doesn't understand. But the child accepts that and gets comfortable with that. That was David HaMelech's legacy to us, and that's one of our missions over the course of the Seder as well. So we'll stop over here for tonight. Emir Tashem, next week is our I guess tonight was our pre-Pesach shir as well, but Emir Tashem, next week is our complete pre-Pesach shir. Emir Tashem, and again, Yashakach to everyone. Have a wonderful evening.